Hey guys, Libby News here. So today I'm going to be doing my final thoughts regarding the Danganronpa 3 anime, but before I get into that, I do want to go ahead and talk about some of the comment moderation stuff. So thanks so much for everybody that offered to be a moderator. I did go ahead and pick out a couple of people, but depending on how bad the spoilers get in the comment section, I might recruit some more. So if you applied and I didn't get back to you, there is a chance I still might reach out to you in the future. The moderators have already begun removing any comments with spoilers in them, and from what I've heard, there's a lot more than I thought there would be, honestly. So any comments that have spoilers in them and they seem like an accident will just be removed, because I understand that sometimes you accidentally mess up and you hint towards something or spoil something because maybe you don't know the rules, but I heard there were other comments that were people just blatantly listing out everyone who dies in V3 or just stating blank dies in the comments section. So if you're posting things like that, then you'll just automatically be blocked. For those types of comments, it's obvious you're trying to be a jerk, you're trying to spoil stuff for either me or other people in the comment section, and it's just straight up rude, honestly. I've already read comments in the comment section of people saying they've had Chapter 5 spoiled for them and other things, so I really don't want to block anybody from commenting, but if I have to, I will. I've already asked the mods to go ahead and start taking screenshots of any comments they remove and any people they might block, and the reason being, so if you want to argue your case and say that you think you were wrongfully removed or blocked or anything like that, their emails are in the description. And also, if you guys see spoiler comments that haven't been removed yet, feel free to let them know, what the comment is so that they can remove it. But anyways, moving on from that, let's go ahead and get into the review. So I went back and I rewatched the episodes that I didn't do individual reviews for, and I'm going to be hitting a lot of the main points that I feel I need to talk about in order to, do this review, but I'm not going to be going through as thoroughly on each episode like I did before. Firstly, I'm going to talk about Kirigiri's death and what I think the whole purpose of her dying and being brought back to life was all about, because I've seen a lot of different people arguing about the reasoning behind this. Okay, so in Future Side, there is this big conflict of Nagi's hope versus Munakata's hope. Munakata's perspective being that despair should be destroyed at all costs and completely, while Nagi's perspective of hope is overcoming despair by having hope. Therefore, despair doesn't have to be completely destroyed, it just has to be overcome. After Kirigiri's death, we see Munakata attack Nagi, telling him that Nagi's version of hope and platitudes are what got her killed. The show set it up to make it seem as if Munakata's beliefs in hope would possibly rub off on Nagi and prove his version of hope to be flawed, but I think the whole scenario was intended to actually do the opposite. So we know that Chisa was a big influence on Munakata's version of hope becoming so legalistic, her stating that she planted the idea of him destroying all despair as a way to pit him against Tengen and have him fall into a greater despair. The greater despair she was referring to was exactly what Munakata was facing in Future Side. Since he loved Chisa and strictly hated despair to the point where he wanted to destroy it completely, learning that Chisa, who was such an important symbol of hope to him, was actually despair, would surely send him spiraling so deep into despair to the point where he would trust no one was hope anymore, including his closest ally Juzo. So overall, I think Kirigiri's death was firstly for the purpose of establishing a bonding point between Nagi and Munakata, since they both lost someone that they loved, and for Munakata to come to terms with the fact that his original version of hope was flawed, and that some despair is needed in order to find a greater hope. Which we also see at the end of this anime was the main theme they wanted to portray during the final scenes with Hajime and Ryota as well, since similarly to Munakata, he wanted to get rid of all despair. Next, I think the thematic reason as to why she was able to survive was once again to emphasize the flaws in Munakata's hope logic. Since the show portrayed his reasonings to be flawed, it makes sense that the show would stress that this is incorrect by having him reap the consequences of it, the example being Juzo's death. Since he wanted to destroy despair at all costs and convinced himself that Juzo was a despair, his standpoint regarding hope was a big factor that played into his ally's death. And on the opposite spectrum, since the show is trying to portray Nagi's hope as the main theme of this anime and what the audience should strive for, it makes sense that they would reward his reasoning by allowing his ally Kirigiri to live while Munakata's ally Juzo passes. Another reason I believe this is what the creators were trying to portray is because of this quote Kodaka says regarding the end of the anime. He states, "I wanted Nagi to move forward carrying the burden of hope, Hinata to move forward carrying the burden of despair, and Munakata to move forward carrying the burden of his dead friends." So this implies to me that the reason he carries this burden has to do with his flawed logic, since that was what led him to injure Juzo so badly in the first place. But this is just my interpretation as to why they would kill her and sort of bring her back to life, I guess. other than them just bringing her back because she's a fan favorite, because I'm sure that had to do with their decision as well. But let me know if you have a theory of your own about it. Next, I'm going to talk about Chikis Execution and the brainwashing of the 77th class. So back when I did my review for episode 9 of Despair Side, it seemed pretty obvious that this was the route they were going to take with this, but there is no way I knew that her death would be nearly as gruesome or as intense as it was. It really felt like they decided to give the sweetest, most hope-filled character the most despair-inducing death, and as a big fan of Chiaki, it really hit me hard having to watch this. The part where she's completely obliterated but is still trying to get up to help Izuru is absolutely heartbreaking, and I don't know why, but for this scene I only teared up. But at the end of the anime, when Hajime's talking to her AI on the boat, I just lost it. I think it was because knowing that all the other members of the 77th class were still able to live and be together, while she had to die such a tragic death, really hurt me. It made me think back to her lines about how she wished she could spend time with everyone and play video games with Hajime once again. The whole thing was just really depressing. But the amazing thing about this scene was that we got to see how Chiaki's hope reached Izuru to the point where he came to believe that hope could possibly be more unpredictable than despair. The reason being that Izuru said it was impossible for him to remember or feel anything from his past life, but because she had hope and continued to attempt to help him in that deformed state, Hajime was able to resurface in the form of tears, proving how unpredictable hope could be. I do want to talk a little bit more about the brainwashing of the 77th class as well, and although I did like how they did Chiaki's execution, as gruesome as it was, I do think I would have preferred the idea of Junko brainwashing the class through manipulation more individually rather than having them all just get brainwashed in one fell swoop with the execution video. My main reasoning for this is that I believe for me personally, after I beat Super Danganronpa 2, learning that all these characters I'd come to know and love and relate to were actually these horribly messed up terrorists, it was really impactful because I was so interested to see what exactly would cause such seemingly normal people to fall into despair. And after I beat the game, one of my favorite things to do was to try to come up with how Junko manipulated each member of the class and what exactly she did to convert them to despair, and seeing it sort of play out like this where it was all done at one time against their own will was a bit of a letdown to me. And I don't totally hate the way it played out, but I do think I would have preferred it had been where she started out by recruiting the people affected by the Twilight Syndrome murder case and then sort of worked her way through the class as many of us had originally thought. I think the biggest thing was just that since it wasn't of their free will, them being turned to despair just sort of lost its impact to me, because now it seems like they're less responsible for their actions and it just pushes it onto, well, Junko brainwashed them. And I know that they still have to live with what they've done, but it just still doesn't seem like it has the same impact that it would have if they would have given over to despair willingly, and especially in this anime if they would have conquered it willingly. I did have somebody on Twitter a while ago send me this screenshot from Super Danganronpa 2 where they do foreshadow brainwashing, and it makes sense that they would have come up with this idea and that they would have used that for the reserve course because there is so many people and it would have been impossible for her to individually go through and manipulate them. But for the 77th class, I think I would have just preferred it to be more of like a cult-like conversion, but that's just my personal opinion. If you preferred this, that's completely fine, and let me know why in the comments section. One thing that I did like that they did here was reference Danganronpa 0, which I'm about to mention a pretty big spoiler for that novel in a few moments, so if you haven't read it and you want to skip this part, go ahead and jump to the time shown on the screen. But the thing that I liked here was that Junko states, the despair of losing someone you love, you'll have despairful emotional systems that'll let you get drunk on ecstasy on that despair. Basically, this means to me that as a way to separate the 77th class's brainwashing from the reserve courses, and even she says, is that she included the death of someone they love to make them more like herself than anyone else she had brainwashed. Because the way that she pushes herself fully into despair is when she kills Matsuda, the one that she loves. So I thought this little reference to Danganronpa 0 was pretty neat. The next thing I want to talk about was the killer's identity, aka the reveal of the suicide videos, brainwashing whichever member was nearest to the monitor into killing themselves. I really like this idea, especially seeing how the video affected Naegi, seeing him confront everyone who had died from the first game and how he may hold some sort of repressed guilt and psychological damage from that was really interesting to see to me. I could tell when playing Danganronpa 1 that each and every death really cut him deep, so seeing it come to life in this vision was really cool to me. I also really enjoyed Juzo's redemption arc in this anime as well. They set it up, of course, at the beginning to appear as if Juzo was in love with Chisa, but we learn that he's actually in love with Munakata. I definitely preferred that he had feelings for Munakata rather than Chisa because, in my opinion, it raises the stakes much more and it makes more sense as to why Junko's blackmailing worked. Because when you think about it, if Munakata was unaware in the first place that Juzo was even romantically attracted to men, then coming out and admitting his feelings would be much more difficult since he would essentially have to out himself along with admitting his one-sided feelings since he already knows that Munakata is in love with Chisa. The setup really makes it easy to sympathize with Juzo and understand his actions a little bit better, even if he did let the fear of admitting his feelings cause a whole lot of despair in the long run. But his death was super sad, and the fact that he continued to try to protect Munakata even after he was betrayed really showed how much he cared for him, and it shows to me just how big of a burden Munakata will have to bear regarding his friend's death at the anime's conclusion. The next part I'm going to talk about is the reveal of the Mastermind of the Future Side arc, and honestly, this is my biggest complaint about the anime. So to quickly summarize, when Ryota gets the video on his phone of Tengen admitting that he was the Mastermind, he plays it off in the video as if he became a remnant of despair. But we learn later that his plan all along was to get Midori to use the Hope video by setting up the killing game. And by not inviting Midori to it, his original scheme was to have Midori hear about the killing game and then use the video. This plan makes no sense to me. And even when I tried to break it down based off of what I knew about him, it still really doesn't make any sense. So, hypothetically speaking, we say that Tengen's plan was to just get Midori to use the Hope video and the future Foundation casualties were no influence on it, so he doesn't care either way if they live or they die. So then you would think that when Midori showed up against his master plan and he decided to include him in the game anyways, it wouldn't make much sense for him to give Midori a forbidden action where he can't use his talent, which is precisely the thing Tengen supposedly wants him to use. But then, if you look at the opposite perspective and say that the killing of the future Foundation members was a part of his plan, since, you know, the organization was fairly dysfunctional, then you would think that he would have invited Midori in the first place and planned on giving him the exact bracelet with that forbidden action, since he wouldn't want him to use it until the end. So either way, it just really doesn't make much sense to me. It seems like the plan contradicts itself, and there's just way too many loose variables, but if you're able to figure it out, please let me know in the comments section. Either way, this just seems like it was sloppily presented because they didn't explain it very well. I mean, we never learned anything about Tengen's motivation, who he was, or anything besides that vague conversation he has with Hajime and Despair Side at the beginning of the anime. And even that just raises way more questions than it answers. But that's just my opinion on that whole Mastermind twist. So now moving to the ending. So in Hope Side, we see that all the 77th class members were revived and brought back to normal by Izuru Kamakura / Hajime, and we learn a little bit more about how he did this in the 2.5 OVA. And this is where I've seen the most amount of mixed opinions. I've seen a lot of people were upset that the 77th class was brought back to life completely, just cured, because they felt as if firstly they got off too easy after everything they had done, and secondly because now that they're back it makes their deaths less impactful in Super Danganronpa 2. I felt the same way about them coming back that I initially did about Kirigiri coming back. It's like, from a fan perspective, I love it because, you know, who wouldn't be happy to see a happy ending for their favorite characters, but from a more critical point of view, I do see how this takes away a lot of the impact their deaths did have in the Danganronpa 2 game. Overall, I wasn't as mad as a lot of other people I've seen, mostly because I just assumed they would come back once the anime was announced and was being teased, but I do see where a lot of the aggravation comes from. Regarding them being brought back to life, though, there was an interview with Kodaka after the anime aired that I'm going to reference again. I already referenced it previously in the video, but in this interview he basically admits that bringing back all of the 77th class was pandering pretty much, but he states at least it was happy pandering, so say what you want about him, at least Kodaka's honest. He also mentions that the 77th class will have to bear their sins in their new life, which essentially means that they'll have to come to terms with everything they did as Despairs, as well as what they did to each other in the killing game. So I guess in that perspective they don't completely get off scot-free. And speaking of coming to terms with the past, we get Ryota as the anti-hero in these last few episodes, attempting to use his hope brainwashing video on the rest of the world. As mentioned before, I think the main theme of this anime was meant to portray that true hope is overcoming despair, and that you need despair in order to have hope. And that trying to repress, destroy, or forget all about despair in order to obtain hope is despair itself, since they need each other in order to exist. I think it's like the old saying goes that you need to go through the bad times in order to appreciate the good. So one thing I did like about the ending is that for a franchise that was so black and white with its themes of hope versus despair in the past, it was really interesting to see that the final showdown in the anime was hope versus hope. This ending and the anime in general seemed to try to blur the lines of hope versus despair much more than the games did, and I can really appreciate that. Although I do understand why some people were disappointed with this last showdown, I guess you could call it, because it wasn't nearly as epic as the final class trials of Danganronpa 1 or 2. It would have been really cool to see Hajime and Naegi team up to defeat despair together in like a final showdown to conclude the whole entire series. In Hope's side, we also learn the origins of Chiaki's AI. The anime reveals that she was created based off of the memories of her classmates. Like I mentioned before, the first time I watched this scene, I was too busy crying to pay attention, but when I went back to rewatch it to make this review, I realized I'm a little salty about this revelation. So before the anime released, we learned in Super Danganronpa 2 that the ultimate programmer, ultimate neurologist, and the ultimate therapist created the Neo World program. So when the anime was announced, I was really excited to learn more about the creation of this, to see Matsuda and Fujisaki interacting, and to learn more about Miei since she was such a mysterious part of the lore at the time. So to me, the fact that we learned absolutely nothing about Miei at all left me just a little bit salty. It just felt like the creators threw this explanation in there last minute because it would have taken longer to show and or explain how the creators of the Neo World program came to make an AI based off of Chiaki, but that's just what my first impression of this revelation was. In that same interview with Kodaka I mentioned before, he actually does state that he came up with the idea of the Chiaki AI being based off of a real person at the very end of the creation of Super Danganronpa 2, so who knows if this memory thing was something he had planned since then or not. Something I personally noticed looking back at the anime as a whole was that the pacing just kind of felt off to me at times, especially in Despair side. It felt like they included a lot of fan service bits that didn't really contribute to the overall story, and that was a big reason as to why there were so many loose ends by the time the show came to conclusion. And I understand what they were attempting to do with the two different animes airing simultaneously and tying into each other, and it's a really creative idea. I just feel like it could have been executed better. They originally advertised Despair side as being the story that told how the 77th class fell into despair, and it did, but that felt like such a small part of the anime. And after watching the anime, it appears that the main purpose of Despair side was really meant to support the plot of Future side. I would have just honestly preferred that they made Future side 24 episodes long and told all the important plot points of Despair side through flashbacks. That way we would have had more time to develop characters like Bandai, Gozu, Miei, etc. that just ended up being really two-dimensional due to time restraint on Future side's end. And then if that was the case, then maybe they would have had time to explain Tengen's reasonings behind what he did and maybe explain how his whole plan made sense, because that still just really bothers me. But overall, I didn't hate this anime. I know I'm criticizing it a lot. I actually did enjoy it, although there were definitely some parts that I feel like could have been executed better. And going back to the revival of the 77th class, I do feel like, as Kodaka said, there was definitely some pandering involved. But on the other hand, it seemed like the overall theme of this anime was that you have to obtain hope by overcoming despair and not just completely trying to forget about it or repress it. So bringing back the 77th class and having them to really face all the despair that they did and overcome it, it really highlights the theme of the anime, and I think that could have been another choice as to why they decided to bring them back other than just pandering. But let me know what you guys thought about the anime in the comments section. I know there was a lot of mixed opinions. Like I said, overall, I really did enjoy it. There were some really good moments that we got out of this anime, including seeing the first killing game, and there were some characters that I really ended up liking a lot as well too, like Juzo and Seiko. So let me know in the comments section what you thought of the anime, if you agree or disagree with my review. And also, I am going to try and do character analysis again soon. I'd planned on doing a Fukawa analysis first, and then a Hajime one after that, so I'm still planning on doing that, and please request stuff, because I honestly love it when you guys request stuff. Don't ever feel like you're bothering me. It helps me figure out what to do next. So if you'd rather see a different character analysis before that or anything like that, just let me know in the comments section, and I will see you guys real soon.
Subscribe to Weeby News for more hope-filled videos.